Howdy, and welcome to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Nord, where we cover a mix of current events, politics, and the law. Take it away, Warren.
Hi, I'm Warren Nord, and welcome to the 16th episode of White Hat Law. Today with me is Warren Johnson, who lives in Dallas and is in the neighborhood of the General Lee statue that was removed recently. And I have with me Bill Boyd. Bill Boyd is and I'm going to get this right by reading it, is the Chief of Staff of the Sons Confederate Veterans Texas Division. And so he's been fighting the monument battle now for some years, so we're going to talk about that. I thought before we started, I'd just point out why I think this is an important topic. I travel around just a little bit sometimes, and I go to various places where hideous things happened. The Colosseum is one of my favorite places in Rome, where my people, Christians, were eaten and stoned, and all sorts of horrible things happened. And I've never once thought, I'm going to go over there and take that place down. Not once. When I visit the Greek islands once, I had the opportunity to look at some old statues of people who were pagans, and they did bad things at some of those places, and I never felt like I needed to take it down. And so I noticed when I was a young man that for at least 100 years after the Civil War, we had a peace. And for more than 100 years, life seemed to go forward, and people are going forward and not arguing about every little thing. And then suddenly it kind of blew up, I guess, in the 90s, and then it really took another trend upward and has turned in the last couple of years into a full-bore, I think, an effort by some people to try to relitigate the peace after the Civil War, as though nobody on the southern side had any honor, and they were all horrible people, and we should. I think the Latin phrase is damnatio memoriae. It's the old phrase where the new Caesar would blacken out on all the coins, the old Caesar, and try to eradicate them from history as though they were all horrible. I don't think that's a good thing for our society. So I thought that this is worth discussing. As we sit here today, the Dallas General Lee statue has been removed, and the Pioneer Cemetery Confederate monument is threatened. Last week, the Dallas City Council had on its agenda to sell the General Lee statue and to take down the rather large monument in Pioneer and to basically revamp that entire area. And it was taken down in some part, because of a lawsuit that we filed, some documentation, some other pressure put on the Dallas City Council. So let's start with some background. Bill, tell us your history with this and how you've been part of the Dallas effort.
Well, I joined the SCV in 2002, so some of these events happened a little before I got into it. Didn't become active in management until about 2010. Okay. So the first event in Texas was in the late 1990s when there were 4 plaques taken down off the Texas Supreme Court building that commemorated its building based on funds that had been left over from the Confederate pension money that the state had put together in 1900 to help indigent Confederate soldiers. So those plaques were taken down, and the Texas Division SCV fought a lawsuit for 13 years with the state of Texas over taking down where they were going, what was going to happen with them. They're currently in the state archives, and we won 1 of 3 legal points and received some indemnity money for doing that. Then the Charleston event.
Now, let me interrupt you. Those were 4 plaques about yay big.
Yep.
That were on the Supreme Court of Texas
in the halls.
In the halls.
That's right.
To talk about the fact that the money that was used to build
the state Supreme Court building
came from the Confederate leftover money from the Confederate pension money.
That's correct.
And the politicians and people decided that these 4 plaques commemorating the fact that money came from that fund was too much, and it had to go right now.
That's correct.
It's a good thing that we have people right on the ball on these very important issues. Now, and because of that, everything in Texas went well, right? It fixed all the problems.
Sure.
Okay.
And of course, they were big and out front and had neon signs on them and whirligigs that you could see from the freeway.
That's sarcasm. Yes.
Yeah. So then Charleston happened, heinous event, and the world went nuts. And so in the interim, there has been events at the University of Texas where they've taken down statues off the mall, part of the Littlefield Monument, took down 2 to begin with, and then last year they took down 4 more. And so we have one ongoing suit in federal court over the second takedown, and we fought, and we had a state court suit which was handed back to us, and we're not going to do anything with it right now, about taking down the first 2 on the University of Texas. So
now, what are these monuments? What are they?
Captain Littlefield was a very successful banker, cattleman, owned a big ranch out in West Texas, oil money, all that sort of business. And the University of Texas was in great financial difficulty in the early 1920s. And he gave the University of Texas some huge amount of money. It was like $20 million or something. And that day it was, and he said as a requirement, he was going to put up a big statue thing in the middle of the mall. And it had Pompeo was the artist, and there was a Lee statue and a Washington statue and a Woodrow Wilson and a Jefferson Davis, and there's this great fountain. And that was all part of his legacy, along with some buildings and some other things. And it was about his heroes and how Woodrow Wilson had brought the country back together as the last binding together in the South, joined the nation and fought World War I, because there was a great amount of strife over the Reconstruction and all the war bad feelings. So that was his contribution to the University of Texas. And there are people at the University of Texas who feel that contribution is not appropriate in today's climate.
Because we don't like peaceful reconciliation of opposing sides.
That's correct.
Yeah, that'd be horrible. Yeah. Okay. And so then more recently, the statue in Travis Park that was dedicated to the women recognizing they had lost husbands, sons, fathers, and brothers to the war effort was taken down this last summer by the San Antonio City Council. And what was the age? How old was that statue?
1895.
So in 1895, a woman artist did a piece about the price that women paid when men went off to war.
That's correct.
Is that okay? And that was taken down because...
And that was the first piece of public art in the city of San Antonio done by a woman artist. And then
so we're going to ignore that part of the history. We want to focus on the faraway part.
The evil that the Civil War was.
Right.
And its many contributing issues. And they simply want to... And there were 2 cannons down there, ceremonial cannons down at the bottom.
Okay. All right.
So then the Lee statue issue comes up, and Dallas City Council decides to do something with that. And we got a temporary injunction for about a week last summer. They had to rethink it, and they went ahead and took it down anyway, damaged the statue in the process, and it's stored...
somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's an old Dallas Naval Air Base.
We haven't been able to see it though, right?
That's correct. No one's been able to see it.
Okay.
We have it on background that it was damaged.
Okay. Well, with that overview, I guess we're going to take a break just for a second. We'll come back, we'll talk to Warren. Not me, Warren, but Warren Johnson. Another Warren. 2 Warrens in one room. How much better could that be? So we'll be back in just a minute.
Whoa, hang on to your hat, folks. More with Warren Nord when we get back. Y'all are back here listening to the White Hat Law Show. Warren, who do we have up next?
And welcome back. And now we're going to hear the story of Warren Johnson. Warren lives in Dallas. Warren, tell us about your experience and how you got involved in this.
Well, I live at about 3 blocks from Lee Park. And it was about mid-August when I heard that this was going down. I would drive by that park several times a day, and it was just something that was always going to be there, you would assume. And then this started happening, and then my first thought was surely some organization like the SCV or the United Daughters Confederacy or the Lee Park Conservancy, which has Lee Park Conserve in its name, and I just given $175 to in July, or Preservation Dallas, which I was a member of, would have stopped this. I thought it was just a political stunt to get a little news coverage, and then it'd all be over with and cooler heads would prevail, but evidently they didn't. And a couple weeks, 3 weeks later, it was gone. But before that, when I realized it was going to be gone, I went out there and took a real good look at it and realized what a beautiful work of art that it is. You walk around it and you can't, there's no bellicose writings, there's nothing that potentially...
Bellicose is a word that means warlike for
Anger,
you and
okay.
Rhea Linda to borrow
Sorry
for
about
us.
that.
Yeah.
No angry words, nothing that would restrict anybody's movement, nothing to reveal war or death or destruction. And even the uniform, I remember looking closely, and you couldn't see anything on there that would designate what army they were with. It was just really, really pretty. And so I went home and began to research it and realized it was created by Alexander Phemister Proctor, who was a renowned sculptor, and he created it Lee, and then there's what's called Lee, Robert E. Lee and Young Soldier is the name of the statue. And even at the base, at the bottom of it, it said, this is, the young soldier is not an aide-de-camp to Lee. It is to represent all the young of the South, all the young men of the South who went to serve under Lee, or just all the young men of the South. So anyway, a couple weeks later, it's gone, and then I go back. I heard there's a group up there, and I'm going back up there to just kind of tell them thank you for being there because they were supportive, even though it was gone. Gave them my card. I'm in the real estate business in the area. I know a lot about the area, and see if I could be of help, and ask them to call me. Never heard from anybody, but still, I was kind of like I was walking around with PTSD. Just the shock of this whole thing going on and happening just really still floored me, and I didn't know what to do. I filed a few Freedom of Information Act requests to see, because they said it was $500,000 to remove it. And then just a guy in a pickup truck and a trailer shows up, and that's far less than $500,000. So I was curious where the money went. And then after a couple of months, after thinking about this deeply, I decided to create a Facebook page called Put Lee Back in Lee Park, because I wanted Lee back in there. If you drive by it today, it's an ugly, gaping hole. It's a blight in the neighborhood. The park now, I can just tell it's not as well kept as it used to be. It's just degrading before our eyes. Okay, so I created this, and I thought, well, how are we going to do it? I sent the initial response to all the city council people, telling them what I wish you guys hadn't done it. I want it back. I got an email back from one of the city council people, which was kind of saying you might want to consider a citizens initiative. Looked at that for a while, and that was going to be too cumbersome. The logistics weren't going to work out. Then I decided to create a nonprofit organization called Return Lee to Lee Park. Can I give the website?
Absolutely.
Return Lee to LeePark.org is the website. We really just kind of reserved it a page there now. So we try to ramp up and provide content to the web page. We filed for a 501c3. We expect to raise funds. Those that want Lee gone or have taken Lee out, they're well funded and well organized. I've researched the enemy, so to speak, and they're very good at what they do. So give the devil his due. So if we're going to get Lee back, and if we're going to save the other statues, we're also going to have to be well funded, and we're going to have to be well organized. So that's kind of the route we're going. I've talked to Bill here. In fact, how I got involved here today with you was Bill called me a couple of weeks ago. I was literally just sitting on the couch, didn't know who he was. And I guess he found out through the Facebook page or somebody else what we were trying to do.
Yeah, it's important to note the Facebook page is up, and you can go to Facebook now.
Yeah, let's put Lee back in Lee Park.
Right, and so that's you can
it's
you can
ongoing.
sign up
We've got
there.
1,200 members on there. I created it December 1st, and by the end of the month we had 1,200 people on board, 1,200 members, whatever you call them.
Whatever you want to call them, likers or
members
something.
or supporters.
Supporters,
Somebody told me the other day, if they either have members or supporters, you got to depend on which. You got to figure out which is which. So anyway, so that's where we got. He asked if I would be part of a lawsuit, and I said sure. And so that's how I got here today.
Outstanding. Of course, for my part, I was contacted by David Vandenberg, who did the first draft of the lawsuit that we did file, and we filed it shortly before the last city council meeting. And I understand that there are some other input. It wasn't just us, and we shouldn't just take credit just for ourselves. There were other people that sent in some documents talking about, hey, you don't really necessarily own this thing. And our lawsuit is based, of course, on the Antiquities Code of Texas, which is supposed to protect historical sites recognized as state archaeological landmarks. So, and we had a request for a TRO in that, and we were prepared to go to court and really do that. But the Dallas City Council, in a moment of sanity, said, "Well, let's slow down a minute," which is always nice. If you can get every city council to slow down just a few seconds before they take these actions, it's a good idea. What's the estimate that the city council has spent so far on just taking down this piece of art?
I think they budgeted close to $500,000. And I've asked.
Between 300 and 700.
Yeah. And their storage bill, if I remember right, will run them about $750,000. And one workman died in the process of getting a crane here before he crashed the crane. The crane crashed and the workman died, and then they had to go look for another crane company. So that was the delay of about a week and a half after our TRO was dismissed. So they've had one workman die in the process.
So I'm a fan of good art, and I never saw General Lee except in pictures, right? And I never saw it. That's just not an area of the world that I go to, and I've never been particularly enamored with history buff. At least I like history that's thousands of years old. That's what I tend to go see. But if someone were to say, "Warren, spend $500,000 on your city, on Dallas, to help it in some way," it wouldn't be ever the choice of my expenditure. There would always be something more important than to spend $500,000 on than that. You got a police pension that's suffering. You've got roads and streets. You've got school project. There's a million things you can do. You will never ever get to the point where you say, yes, the next best use of $500,000 for the peace and tranquility of my city is the destruction of this statue, or the pending destruction of the Confederate Park monument. Are you familiar with that one?
No.
Are you familiar with that one? It's stories tall, I'm told.
Yeah, it's 6 stories tall, granite spire with statues around the bottom of it.
I'm going to go right here, and I want to see if we can find a picture of it and insert right here. There you go. See?
And it was originally where the I-30 interchange is now, and they moved it. They took it down, put the I-30 interchange in, and moved it over into Pioneer Park in 1962.
So it has been moved.
It has been moved.
Yeah,
but neither one of these artworks were paid for by Dallas City money. They were donated to the city.
It's a very good point. Even the park, I believe, was donated itself from the county to the city.
It's an interesting deal.
And WPA money built Arlington Hall.
That's right.
And the base that the statue stood on.
It's always, you get into these issues, and it's weird because you have a number of things. Quite often, it's a cemetery, and so the cemetery is run by a number of people. The cemetery gets full, it stops being used, and then it falls into disrepair. And then the natural course of events happens, and the state winds up, or the city winds up taking care of it. And so you wind up having these convoluted issues of who gets to decide what about the things that are in it.
That cemetery was originally a Masonic cemetery, and the Masons gave it to the city.
Now, but usually when they give this to the city, there's usually strings attached, just like there's strings attached when the feds give us money.
They have a retrieval or reversal clause, which that they are contemplating, maybe or maybe not exercising.
See, to me, that's the right way to handle all these things, is for the city to say, we've done this, but we'd like to offload this and privatize it and give it to the group that's closest and values to the people that gave it to them, and if possible, back to the people that gave it to them, and that way the city, nobody in the city has to feel like the state is sponsoring some message they don't want to sponsor, and you just eliminate this issue. But nobody ever really. That never seems to be taken seriously as an idea.
Well, that's the screwy thing, if I don't mind if I interject here. That's the screwy thing about Lee, and is what I was trying to say. The statue there says nothing about a war, nothing about a political philosophy, anything like that. It is just a beautiful piece of art that, for whatever reason, they decided to assign a meaning to. Okay, this is public art sitting out there, and then a governmental body assigned a meaning to that piece of art. Now, if there's another city council, would they sign another meeting? I mean, this is what city councils get to do. Is that part of their job? I mean, no longer potholes and street lights. Now it's meaning, artistic meaning and feelings.
Well, if we're making decisions based on the content of the art. Now, if the Dallas City Council said, we're not going to have any message art anywhere on city property, that would be one thing. That would be content neutral. That would be a bad decision, but that eliminates the issue. But if they say, we don't like this message, we do like this message, so we're going, and well, that, you start to saying, well, we have message content decision making that is based on what I call transient ideas. To me, the whole thing is offensive just because it says if you don't meet the 21st century standard of what's right and just, then it should be destroyed. It should be destroy it all, burn it all down. Everything prior to whatever the latest umbrage is, whether it's the stupid prom dress issue that happened this week.
Prom dress is cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation. So if it doesn't meet our umbrage standards right now, then it has to be destroyed. Can we not simply say, Robert Lee was a man of his time. He was an honorable man for the period in which he lived. George Washington owned slaves, but he was an honorable man for the time in which he lived, and he helped things go forward. And so this Julius Caesar, he may be reprehensible in some areas, but he did some things that were positive. There are reasons why people can be honorable and honored. And I go back to World War I, Red Baron. Sure. Red Baron was buried by the by the bad guys, right? Shot down by the Austrian, or he was buried by the Austrian pilots, some of whom he had shot down. You have the World War I Christmas armistice, where you have this idea that you can be enemies, but you can still recognize that the other side has some honor to it. You can't do that anymore. It has to be, if they're a bad guy, then you have to burn their houses, destroy their descendants, and wipe them off the face of the planet.
Well, good point. A lot of enemies often honor each other. Okay. You were an Army veteran, I believe.
I am.
I'm a Marine Corps veteran. But what are some of the Apache helicopter? Okay. Right. And some of the
more cultural appropriation. I can't believe we would do that.
And other Native American, even though they fought them and were merciless toward each other, they still honored each other.
Absolutely.
In that way. And same thing after several years, probably after the Civil War. I mean, you got Fort Bragg, you got Fort Hood, all these others. You got you probably know better than I do. Some of the weapon systems, I think, are named after Confederate officers.
It's just pretty normal.
Because they honored each other. And we'll go back to, what are the reasons somebody should be in a park? Well, Lee, other than that statue itself is a beautiful work of art, is the contributions that he made to the state of Texas. General Winfield Scott, during the Mexican-American War, called Lee America's finest soldier. Lee spent 32 years as a United States Army officer. The last 6 years of his 32-year career, which he was probably, I'm sure, contemplating retirement and heading back up to Arlington, Virginia, and kick back on the plantation or wherever he lived. And then he was defending the forts just west of here, from Oklahoma down to just south of San Antonio, or just west of San Antonio. He commanded the 2nd Cavalry. And defending the settlers in Texas from vicious attacks. So just those things alone, should be honored for a statue if you need to have a reason to honor someone.
He was actually in Texas when the war started, and he was recalled.
Exactly. Well, he was recalled by Winfield Scott to come and take over the thing. And so he just, as we all know, he said, "I cannot lift my sword against Virginia." And those times, everyone was more loyal to their state at the time.
So let's take a break, and we'll come back in a minute, and we'll wrap up with a little defense of Lee and where we are today and what's going to happen in the future. We'll be back in just a minute.
Whoa, hang on to your hat, folks. More with Warren Nord when we get back. Y'all are back here listening to the White Hat Law Show. Warren, who do we have up next?
Welcome back. Just our finishing thoughts. I thought I'd talk about, we hear sometimes, again, people trying to undo the peace of the Civil War. They don't like the fact that Lee's soldiers were able to leave the battlefield with their weapons. They don't like the fact that General Campbell saluted the Confederates on their way out. They don't like the fact that Grant and his administration never went after any of these guys for treason. There's reasons for that. And there's a difference between treason, where I am trying to give aid and comfort to the enemy, which is another country, and simply being more loyal to my state than I am to the country. Back then, my understanding, I wasn't around, back then my understanding was that we would say the United States are doing this. And it was a plural. People understood the states to be a plural. The United States of America was not a collective noun just yet, where we'd say the United States is doing something. It was more of an are. And so people were more loyal to their state. And so to say that they were treasonous because they wanted to leave the Union is not quite the same flavor as a person who's treasonous to their country in the same way we think about it today. And there's also the idea of, look, we're making a peace. There's a value to that. And I'd also mention that if you pull a single thread out of a piece of cloth, it's probably not going to fall apart. If you pull one thing, you find the most heinous. If you found, for example, there was a statue of a Confederate beating somebody in some triumphant way, which I don't know exists anywhere, and you take that out, that's the fabric is still intact. But when you talk about, we're going to take off little plaques here, we're going to take out a huge, beautiful statue out of a park that at one point was gorgeous. You're pulling multiple threads out. There's not going to be not a lot left when you take out every negative thing out of your past. I look at R.L. Thornton Freeway in Dallas, named after a Ku Klux Klan leader in the 1950s. I look at the city of Arlington, where I reside, named after General Lee's estate. That's not 4 steps removed. That's 1 step removed. That's right there. Are we going to rename the city of Arlington? I look at John Peter Smith Hospital District, JPS Hospital, named after John Peter Smith, a Confederate colonel. These were honorable people. John Peter Smith is the father of Fort Worth. Are we going to focus on the few years he did this, and he voted against going to the Texas going into the Civil War? But he went and served because that's what he thought he needed to do, and he came back and helped create Fort Worth. I just think that we've got so far afield, focusing on little nitpicky things that did not actually solve any problems. If they had said, we need to add a statue to commemorate the people in the North that died and reconfigure something in some way, that would have been different. We could find private money to do that. You can do lots of things if you want to do that, but to take down, deliberately spend money that you don't have in order to destroy something seems wrong. I'm glad we've got this lawsuit. I very much appreciate your involvement, and of course one of our plaintiffs. We would be remiss if we didn't mention Catherine Gann, who's also another plaintiff, and of course she's I always have to make sure I look these things up so I don't misstate them. She's a descendant of Frank Teich, or Teich, depending, the sculptor who created the Confederate Monument Pioneer Cemetery, and a member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. I have to say, generally speaking, that a number of the organizations that I think should be picking up the ball here have not done so. And before I let you go, are there people dropping the ball, Bill?
There are mixed motives, I think, in some of their reluctance. Some of them may be personal, social. Some of them may not have resources to do that. And I'm going to plug, go to the Texas Sons of Confederate Veterans website, and you can scroll down the page, and in the middle of the bottom of the page, there's a donate button, which will take PayPal and credit cards. And if you would like to contribute to our legal effort and continuing the good fight to keep monuments and whatnot up, well, we would appreciate your contribution. There's a bunch of disparate groups for a variety of reasons. They may have, they are interested, but some of them feel uncomfortable being called things by some parties which might align with the word racist. Right. In polite company, they don't feel that's appropriate. Some of them think in the background that they can do it with power politics in the background like it's been done previously. That's proven not to be true in this case, because those people that are advocating this position don't seem to be susceptible to that sort of stuff. Bunch of reasons. And no, they have not stepped up. We have fought 3, 4, 5 lawsuits in the state of Texas, and we will continue to do that, God willing, and money available.
Outstanding. I also want to give credit to David Vandenberg, who did the first draft of this lawsuit before we filed it, and of course, lastly, our other active plaintiff, Warren Johnson. With that, we'll let you go. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we want to thank you for listening to the White Hat Law Show here with Warren Norrid. To find out more about Warren, check him out at norridlaw.com. See you next time.